laugh, but then again, you don't at the same time. The Internal Revenue Service. What is there to say about this fine, upstanding, and well-oiled governmental agency that everyone knows has the best interests of the American taxpayer at heart? Please bring in the custodial crew and let us wipe away the after effects of our collective dripping sarcasm. Save for a moment the scandal this IRS is currently embroiled in. That in itself is something else. Let us take this a step further and finally, once and for all, remake this beast into something more manageable for everybody. Welcome into MidPoint, the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, and a man who has the ideas to make this happen. Pete Sepp joins us today on MidPoint. Pete, thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
Have to be careful. I have that dripping sarcasm working because, boy, I'm telling you, the last couple of days, what we are seeing about the IRS. Pete, let's just start there from the American public themselves, the American taxpayer, who every single time will ask, how did we get here? And how did this organization become such an absolute disaster where apparently they can't even have current computers, where they're misspending money, and where no one seems to know until all of a sudden something like this happens?
Well, first I'd say that there's a climate of fear that has persisted with our tax system and the agency that's collected the tax since the very beginning. You flash back, for example, to a poll taken in the fall of 2001, where more people by a 50 to 32% margin feared getting an audit notice from the IRS in the mail than feared getting anthrax in the mail. That's a testimony, I think, to the problems of perception with the tax agency. And it's not just perception, it's very real. The tax agency has had extraordinary powers of investigation and collection since its formation. And we, as taxpayer advocates, have had to push back with 3 separate Taxpayer Bill of Rights packages in the form of legislation from 1988 to 1998. But there's another factor at work here, and that's the sheer complexity of the tax system itself. When you're talking about something that imposes over 6 billion hours a year in just compliance paperwork burdens on the American people, individuals and businesses, just to figure out the current 1040 tax return system and the corporate tax return system, that leaves a whole lot of room for latitude with the agency enforcing it. And they're going to enforce it sometimes arbitrarily, oftentimes very harshly.
Arbitrarily, I think, is what a lot of Americans would think about this right away. Let's talk about this Taxpayer Bill of Rights. There is a 10-point Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and it is fair to say that you've responded to this and your organization is talking about this. But let's look at some of these things. We have the first 5 that are sitting up right here on screen. We'll bounce back to these. But you're giving taxpayers the right to be informed and quality service. Pete, those two almost go together because rarely does the IRS inform anybody of anything that would work in their favor, and rarely do you get any sort of quality service from these people. It is like pulling teeth, and it never changes. So, please, go ahead.
Yes, this is part of the problem. I think that the IRS National Taxpayer Advocate, Nina Olson, has been very sincere in wanting to clarify these rights. I think that the IRS Commissioner, in saying that these rights have always been around and we're just packaging them in a better way, is not quite true at all. And that's why we've had to have legislation in 3 separate instances passed. But to its core, what we're talking about here is something that looks really good on paper and would be an exemplary thing for the agency to follow if indeed it would follow those guidelines. And it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, in the taxpayer advocate's own annual report to Congress, quality service is a very serious problem at the IRS right now, with an inability to even answer telephone inquiries in a timely fashion more than 6 times out of 10. And that's just the surface of the IRS's customer service problems.
Pete, here's something else. We go back to that, the first 5 here, and the one that just smacks me is challenge the IRS's position and be heard. I guarantee you every single taxpayer right now is screaming at their screens and wondering when that has ever come around, because the point about challenging the position and be heard, it is such a draconian organization that really, if we're talking about the taxpayer being able to do that, they could spend years tied up with the IRS. There simply is no way that I feel that any citizen believes that this organization wants to hear them and would respond with anything more than, sorry, show us your receipts, buddy. Sit down.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. I know that in the course of my organization's lobbying for taxpayer rights laws, we've successfully gotten Congress to agree to put into place procedures like administrative appeals of audits, so you don't have to go directly to tax court if you feel that you've been wronged or that your information hasn't been properly presented. Still, though, there are so many hurdles to climb, and this is especially the case with small businesses. If you're a small business owner, the IRS comes to you and says, well, we've examined your tax return. We feel you owe an extra $5,000 in taxes beyond what you say that you paid and what you say that you owe. Well, the business owner has a decision to make. You can hire an attorney, go into tax court, and end up spending more than $5,000 just proving your innocence in the process. Just doesn't work. Most business owners will say, forget it. I know I'm right, but I'm still going to pay that tax bill to save the time and the hassle and the expense. That's unfortunate. We have to have, for example, something like an alternative dispute resolution procedure that would allow businesses to have third-party mediation in cases like these. It'd be a lot cheaper, a lot more effective, and it's been proposed as legislation. Congress.
We have left here, I want to play a soundbite here, which comes from the hearings that talks about the IRS investigators basically telling the IRS they're not complying to a subpoena. Listen to this.
So you have no ambiguity about what it means. You believe it's been a duly issued subpoena,
right?
And you have not complied with it. Is that correct?
There is physically no way anyone could have complied between February 14th and now. We have never said we won't comply. We have said, in fact, we're.
Well, are you going to comply or not?
We are complying, and I will tell you to comply.
No.
You'll be next year. You'll be next year still getting documents.
Now, if we take the second part of this Taxpayer Bill of Rights and we hear everything that John Koskinen is saying, the arrogance that is here, number 10 spits right out at us, a fair and just tax system. Pete, there are people out there who will say that can't happen. The IRS doesn't want it to happen. They will fight this tooth and nail. We'll never see it in our lifetime. How would you answer those folks?
Yeah, the current tax system is neither fair nor just. Now, I'm not going to defend the IRS in this case. I will say that there is an unindicted co-conspirator here, and that's Congress in failing to reform and simplify the tax laws themselves. Do that, as well as enact more taxpayer rights reforms, and you'll have a tax agency with less power and less arbitrariness over people's lives. Still in all, you look at right number 10, which is very important here in one of its explanations, saying that the IRS can consider what are called facts and circumstances in the case of an individual taxpayer. That's something that's very important for agency managers to do, and it underscores the main point of all of this. All of these 10 rights are great things on paper. We can only hope that the bureaucracy embraces it, but we can't count on it. That's what has to happen next. Congress is going to have to get on the ball by codifying all of these things in statute, further clarifying them, and saying to the agency, you don't have a choice over whether you're going to exercise these things. It's going to be the law. You're going to do it.
One can only hope, and the taxpayers will be happy if it actually comes to that and it's real law. Pete Sepp, National Taxpayers Union. Thanks so much for joining us, Pete. I'm sure we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Take care.
You also. Unfortunately, we'll talk again, and probably when we do talk again, the unfortunate part is that we'll probably be looking at these 10 provisions here on this Taxpayer Bill of Rights and probably still not seeing anything done within our lifetime, which is scary. What is not scary is we will take a break and come back right here, because on the Newsmax TV network every single day, trust me, on MidPoint, we question everything.
U.S.